Picture this, a night of complete darkness. Not a single lamp, not a flicker of fire. Just you, a fragile wooden canoe, and the boundless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The sky above is full of stars, but you have no map, no compass, not even a ruler to measure. At a time when the greatest European explorers still feared falling off the edge of a flat world, they were people who achieved the impossible. Not only were they unafraid of that immensity, but they considered it their home. They were the Polynesian voyagers, the masters of wayfinding, the art of sensory navigation. They sailed not with tools, but with wisdom. They looked to the sky and read the stars like a living guidebook. They lay down on the canoe and felt the stories the waves told, listening for the breath of an island from dozens of miles away. They followed a tiny bird and trusted it would lead them home. They settled an ocean vaster than a continent, connecting islands thousands of kilometers apart, in a miracle achieved through stillness, observation, and a treasure of knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations. Today, we will step together onto a Wa'akalalua alongside a kapuna, an elder teacher, to relearn those ancient lessons. This isn't a typical history lesson, but a meditative journey to discover the greatest secret, how to never be lost even when you are in a place that seems the most unfamiliar. And you see, the journey we are about to begin isn't just a story. It's an experience that requires relaxation and focus. So, before you dive deeper into the tale of these great voyagers, do yourself a quick favor. If you find this journey interesting and want to join me in exploring more of history's most peaceful corners, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That small action from you is a huge motivation for me to continue creating journeys like this one. And I'm always curious to know where you're listening from. Please leave a short comment below telling me which city you're in and what time it is for you right now. It's wonderful to know that we, though far apart, are sharing a peaceful moment like this one together. All right, men, now find a really comfortable position. Take a deep breath in and exhale gently. Imagine your breath blending with the sea breeze. Let's drift together and begin walking the first water route from the dawn of the journey. Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail across the vast, star-dusted Pacific Ocean. But forget everything you know about modern navigation. No GPS, no glowing screens, not even a magnetic compass. Tonight, you're an apprentice to the Polynesian master navigators, the Wayfinders. Picture yourself standing on the deck of a Wa'akalalua, a massive double-hulled canoe carved from sacred trees. The deck moves beneath your bare feet with a gentle living rhythm. The salt spray mists your face, and the only sounds are the creak of the lashings holding the hulls together, the whisper of the wind in the pandana sails, and the endless soothing sush of the ocean against the hull. You're not a tourist on a cruise ship. There's no buffet dinner waiting for you. In fact, you'd probably last about 2 hours out here before asking the captain to check the Wi-Fi password. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, maybe from a cozy apartment in Hanoi or a quiet house in the countryside, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first lesson begins not with a chart, but with surrender. You must learn to stop looking for the way and start feeling it. A master navigator, your kupuna, stands beside you. His eyes are crinkled at the corners from a lifetime of squinting at horizons. He doesn't hand you a sextant. Instead, he places a weathered hand on your shoulder and guides you to lie down on the springy deck matting. "Close your eyes," he murmurs. His voice is rough and warm as coral stone. "Listen." At first, you only hear the obvious: water, wind, the occasional cry of a seabird. But he urges you deeper. You feel the canoe's motion change from a simple rocking to a complex conversation with the ocean. A long, lazy swell lifts you up, holds you for a moment, and sets you down with a gentle sigh. That, he explains, is the ocean breathing. Then you feel a quicker, choppier pattern cross-hatching the larger swells. That's the wind's handwriting, a local disturbance. And beneath it all, if you concentrate until your bones seem to listen, you can sometimes detect a deep, powerful pulse, a current, a river within the sea, pulling you steadily toward a place you cannot see. You're learning to read a liquid map. Your stomach becomes your compass, your skin the sensor for temperature and humidity shifts. This holistic awareness is known as kilo. It's the foundation of everything. It's how, centuries later, historians believe Polynesians managed what seems impossible, locating pinpricks of land in an ocean that covers nearly a third of the Earth's surface. It was less like navigation and more like a form of deep meditative communion with the natural world. Now, let's get one popular historical event out of the way. You've probably heard of Captain James Cook, the British explorer who discovered many Pacific islands in the 18th century. Well, imagine his surprise when he arrived in Tahiti and found people already there. People who, when asked, pointed to islands even farther away, describing their locations with terrifying accuracy without any instruments. Cook and other European explorers were astounded. They were using chronometers and complex mathematics, often getting hopelessly lost and dying of scurvy. Meanwhile, the Polynesians had been crisscrossing this aquatic desert for over 2 millennia, settling everything from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island in what historians call the last major chapter of human migration. They didn't find the islands, they already knew they were there. Here's a little-known fact to curl up with. The first thing you'd have to master, even before the stars, is the art of not getting sick, in a revolutionary way. The Wa'akaulua isn't a dry vessel. It's a living entity that takes on water. You're not bailing frantically, you're managing it. The hulls are connected with flexible sennit rope, allowing the entire structure to flex and twist with the waves instead of fighting them, an ancient, brilliant piece of marine engineering. There was no bathroom, no private cabin. You'd sleep in a small sheltered hut on the deck, curled up with other navigators in training, lulled to sleep by the very motion that makes a modern person reach for the seasickness bags. And your sunscreen? A paste made from coconut oil and various clays. It was functional, probably not something you'd find in Sephora today. Your kupuna teaches you to watch the clouds. A stationary, puffy cloud in otherwise empty sky can mean an island is beneath it, its warm thermals and vegetations creating its own tiny weather system. The color of the ocean shifts from the deep indigo of the abyss to a lighter, greener blue over shallow lagoons, sometimes reflecting on the undersides of clouds like a faint, shimmering ghost. You learn to taste the air. Sometimes a faint scent of pikake flowers or the smoky aroma of a hearth fire can travel for miles, a fragrant clue carried on the trade winds. Every sense is a tool. Every ripple, every bird, every cloud is a word in the ocean story. Historians and anthropologists still debate the exact sequence and timing of the Polynesian expansion. Was it a planned, deliberate migration, or a series of accidental voyages driven by storms and currents? The evidence, woven into language, DNA, and canoe designs, suggests it was anything but an accident. It was the greatest navigational feat in human history, performed without a written word, using only the whispers of the world around them. And as you lie there on the deck, feeling the planet turn beneath you, the distinction between you and the ocean begins to gently, peacefully fade away.
Kupuna's voice echoes through the night, over the sound of the waves. Now, open your eyes. You sit up and look up, and then you hold your breath. The sky you thought you knew is no longer a chaotic tapestry of glitter. Under your teacher's guidance, it becomes a story, a living map. Kay's finger points to a brilliant constellation you know as the Southern Cross. It's the K Kasku, he whispers. It swims across the sea of sky, and when its long arm reaches the horizon, it's the way to Tahiti. You're not just looking at the stars, you're reading signs written in light. Each star, each constellation is a divine guide, another kupuna in the sky. And they rise and set in predictable positions, forming a perfect cosmic compass. You learn that the sky rotates on a fixed axis, an invisible axis that passes through the North Star in the north and, for Polynesians, a similar point in the south, near the Southern Cross. This is Te Punga, the anchor of the sky, holding all the other constellations in place. Now, let's talk about a common historical fact. Most people know that European sailors like Magellan and Cook used sextants to determine their latitude by measuring the angle of the sun or stars relative to the horizon. It was a complicated process, requiring detailed tables and a good watch hull of which were fragile, easily damaged, and completely useless on a cloudy day. The Polynesians developed a completely different system, one that was committed to memory. They memorized 220 major stars and constellations, along with the exact positions of rise and set relative to specific islands. Imagine memorizing the entire Google Maps app, but without a phone, with only your eyes and the stories of your ancestors. You'll have to know that when the constellation Orion, which they call Tata, rises vertically above the horizon, it's pointing you toward the Marquesas Islands. It's not rocket science, it's more sophisticated than that, because it requires no fuel other than your attention. And here's a strange, little-known fact that historians still debate. These navigators didn't just follow the stars. They also used anti-stars, stars that rise or set on the opposite side of the sky from the direction they wanted to go. If your target island is located where the star Herculia, aka Ceres, sets, keeping its anti-star, perhaps Periata, aka Vega, rising behind you will help you stay on track. It's like driving a car and knowing you've re-headed home because you see Mount Badan behind you, not ahead. They created a mental, celestial navigation grid where each island was the center of its own circle of stars. They called the paths between islands the star chain. So, instead of thinking I have to go east, they would think I'm following the path of Antares. It's a completely different way of thinking about space and movement. One that makes your journey feel alive and meaningful, as if the gods themselves were beckoning you forward. Your kupuna begins to sing a song, a meal, his voice rising and falling rhythmically. It's not a lullaby, it's a list, a memory poem. Each verse names a star and the island it leads to. Look, he says, pointing up at a bright orange star. It's Ia. It guides us to the highlands of Maui. You try to remember, feeling overwhelmed, as if trying to cram an encyclopedia into your brain. The teacher smiles, reading your confusion. Don't try to remember with your head, he says. Remember with your heart, with your feet, with your bones. Let the sky imprint itself inside you. And then, playfully, he added a gentle joke. And if you forget, don't worry. It'll be awkward if we go to Samoa instead of Tahiti and have to explain that we got lost because one twinkling star looked so much like another. You feel a smile spread across your face. You lie down again, resting your head on a palm leaf cushion, and look up at the slowly rotating universe. You begin to see patterns, connections. You are no longer a passive passenger. You are beginning to learn the language of the universe, and Kupuna's voice, along with his song of the stars, becomes the perfect background noise, guiding you into a peaceful sleep where your dreams are also filled with guiding lights. Kupuna's song fades, and instead, your ears open to another language, the language of water. He leads you to the side of the boat, placing your hands on the smooth wooden hull of the boat, smoothed by seawater in time. Now, listen with your skin, he whispers. The boat is no longer a means of transportation. It is a megaphone, a giant sensor that transmits every story the ocean has to tell. You close your eyes, and the visual world disappears. All that remains is movement. You feel long, graceful waves, waves that Kupuna calls swells the heartbeat of the ocean. They come from the horizon, carrying energy from distant winds, lifting the boat steadily like the breathing of some giant creature. This is the soundtrack of the journey, but above that background music lies more complex rhythms, smaller, more chaotic waves, created by the local wind. That's the whisper of the sky right now. And sometimes, very rarely, you sense a different vibration, a subtle interference in the wave patterns. These are Eco's waves, reflecting off a distant island, colliding with oncoming waves and creating a secret, messy music that only the most trained ear and skin can decipher. Consider a popular historical event, the Battle of Midway in World War II, where American pilots found the Japanese fleet, thanks in part to their ability to read sea signs. They were day learners compared to these masters. While other maritime cultures might rely on seeing land from the top of their masts, Polynesian navigators could see land from below sea level through the stories the waves told. They didn't need to climb anywhere, okay? They felt the island through their bare feet on the deck of their boats. It's the difference between looking at a photograph and actually standing there. One is information, the other is experience. And here's a strange, little-known fact. These navigators sense waves not just from the island, but also from the giant reefs, underwater mountains that never rise above the sea. These underwater structures disturb the deep ocean currents and create unique, intricate wave patterns on the surface. An experienced Kupuna can sense the presence of a reef from miles away, just as you might sense the presence of a great wall in the darkness, simply by listening to the echoes of your own breathing. They call these subtle cues island shadows, a beautiful, almost poetic concept, okay? That even when the island is invisible, its spirit is still present on the water's surface. Historians and oceanographers still debate the physical feasibility of this. Modern experiments with simulated ships have shown that such subtle wave disturbances do exist and can be detected. Your Kupuna asks you to lie down on the floor of the boat, your cheek pressed against the cool, damp plank. Tell me what you feel, he says. At first, it's just a chaos of vibrations, okay? But then, you begin to separate them. There's a slow, basic rhythm, the main swell. Overlaid on top is a faster, more chaotic vibration, the wind. And then, far away, you sense a slight ripple, almost a stillness in the chaos, a slow-moving point of peace. There, Kupuna whispers, his voice filled with satisfaction. Yes, the island's breath is calling us. You can't believe you've just felt it. It's like seeing a hidden image in a hallucinatory painting for the first time. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then, with a gentle touch of humor, he added, if you feel sick, don't worry, it's just your stomach trying to translate the language of the sea. "It's not very good yet." You laughed, and your focus returned. You lay there again, letting the ocean's wave stories wash over you, feeling each wave as a whisper, a promise of land ahead. And in that silence, the sound of the waves gently lapping against the hull and the warmth of the pool beside you. You felt your mind drift away, no longer trying to understand, but simply feeling, and finally drifting off into a sleep where you dreamed you were a wave, gently lapping against the shore of an unknown island. Kupuna's voice still resonates with you. The melodies of the stars transformed into something more concrete, a living, breathing map. Tonight, he's teaching you not just constellations, but navigational songs, mile-long songs that can last for hours, describing in astonishing detail the paths between islands. You sit in a small hut on deck, the flickering light of a seashell oil lamp illuminating his lined face. He begins to sing, and it's not a song with a soothing melody that you can fall asleep to. It's a rhythmic sequence of names, instructions, and topographical descriptions. It's like a podcast encoded into poetry, a musical encyclopedia. "Listen," he says, his voice a warm bass. "This song will lead you from the reefs of Poka-i to the cliffs of Nihoa." And then he began to list every guiding star, every wave pattern, every seabird, every feature of the clouds, even the feel of the ocean currents as they subtly change temperature. You must memorize them all, not a single word wrong, because in the dark of night or in a storm, this will be your only compass. Now, let's talk about a popular historical event. You may have heard of ancient paper maps, like the Ptolemaic maps or the Portolan maps of medieval Europe, which were rich in detail, but also full of sea monsters and errors. They were physical objects that could tear, burn, or rot. But Polynesian maps could not be destroyed in that way. They were preserved in collective memory, passed down from generation to generation through songs like this. Each famous maritime family had its own Malays, carefully guarded trade secrets. When Captain Cook charted the routes, he was writing down something that had been remembered for centuries. There is a gentle irony here. While the libraries of Europe may burn down, the library that lives in the minds of these Polynesian navigators may live forever, as long as someone still sings the songs. And here's a curious, little-known fact. The songs were more than just nautical information. There were also chronicles, records of family history and mythology. A description of a particular ocean current might be accompanied by a story about a sea god who created it. An instruction to follow a star might mention the great ancestor who first discovered that route. This turned a long journey into a sacred pilgrimage, a reenactment of the journeys of ancestors. Turned navigation into an act of memory and reverence. Historians still debate the accuracy of the songs. How could a song accurately describe an island the singer had never set foot on? Some scholars believe the songs were composed and refined over hundreds of years through countless voyages, with each generation adding newly discovered details. It's like an ancient open source project, but instead of being hosted on GitHub, it's hosted in voices. Your kupuna stops and looks at you intently. "Now, it's your turn," he says. Your throat feels dry. You try to repeat what he sung, your voice shaky and hesitant, forgetting the name of the star and confusing the order of the wave signs. He doesn't seem angry, just shakes his head gently. "You're trying to memorize with your tongue," he says. "Let the song flow through your veins. Feel it." He starts again, and this time, you don't try to memorize the words. You close your eyes and visualize the path. You feel the rhythm of the song match the beat of your heart, the motion of the boat. Gradually, the names and instructions begin to sink into your mind. Not like a list to be memorized, but like a story you've known for a long time. And then, mischievously, he adds a gentle joke. If you sing it wrong, you might never reach the island, but instead end up in a sea full of fish that sing to your tune. You laugh, and the tension in you melts away. The song continues, now like a flowing stream, guiding you, lulling you to sleep. You no longer try. You simply go with the flow, and in that half-awake state, you feel as if you are truly traveling, not on the sea, but on the very melodies of history and memory, a sonic map that guides you to sleep. The first light of dawn does not awaken you with the song of birds, but with the gentle flutter of wings in the air above your head. You open your eyes, and there is Kupuna, sitting still as a statue, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Winged messengers, he whispers, without turning his head. They are our friends, our eyes in the sky. You learn that not all birds are alike. There are manual, little white terns that fly out to sea to feed during the day, but always return to land at night. If you see them flying in a particular direction at dusk, that is the path to their nest, which leads to an island. Then there are the Iwa frigate birds, pirates of the sky, with long, narrow wings. They never land in the water because their feathers are not waterproof, soar high in the clouds, and their sharp eyes can spot schools of fish from miles away. If you see an Iwa circling purposefully, it's probably tracking a school of fish, and where there are fish, there are usually fishing boats, and behind them, land. You sit there for hours, learning to distinguish each flight pattern, each flapping of wings, until you can read the sky like a living logbook. Now, consider a common historical event. You may have heard the story of Christopher Columbus and his sighting of green-leafed tree branches floating in the sea, a sign that land was nearby. That was a crude, lucky sign compared to the Polynesian system of birdwatching. Columbus was looking for passive clues. The Polynesian Navigators were actively interpreting the behavior of living creatures, a much more complex and dynamic system. They didn't rely on a single sign, had a network of biological indicators. And while Columbus and his European colleagues frequently starved or fell ill with scurvy, the Polynesians, by tracking birds, regularly led them to rich fishing grounds, ensuring a supply of fresh food on long voyages. And here's a curious, little-known fact. Some sailors are said to have carried pet pigeons with them in wicker cages. Why? Not to send messages, but to release them when they suspected land was nearby. If the bird flew away and didn't return, it had found land. If it returned to the ship, there was no land in sight. It was a kind of primitive biocompass, a simple but effective scientific experiment. Historians still debate how common this was, since keeping birds aboard a narrow boat for weeks at a time was quite a challenge. But it shows their ingenuity and willingness to use whatever tools were available to them, whether technological or biological. Kupuna points to a small flock of terns flying quickly southwest. They're going home, he says. They don't fly more than 30 miles from their nest. If we follow them, we'll find land before sunset. You feel a quiet excitement. This is no longer theory. This is reality. You're actually using this knowledge. And then, with a wry smile, Kupuna adds, just don't try to catch them. Flying like a bird is much harder than watching them fly. And I don't think your arms are strong enough for that. You laugh, imagining yourself clapping your hands awkwardly on the deck. You continue to watch, and as the sun rises higher, you begin to notice patterns. Birds hunting in flocks, birds flying alone, birds that seem to be in a hurry, and birds that glide leisurely. Each flight tells a story, and you are slowly learning that language. Their calls, the flapping of their wings, even their shapes against the sky, all become part of a peaceful symphony, guiding you, lulling you into a deep state of peace where you can almost feel the presence of the island ahead. Not in images, but in the little lives being guided home. As the sun rises, your world narrows to a vast circle of water, and Kupuna begins to teach you the most subtle of lessons, the art of reading invisible signs. He points down at the water. Color, he says, it's not just blue. You stare, and slowly you begin to see. The deep blue of the ocean, where the water's deep, fades to a greenish blue as your boat drifts over a coral reef, even as the island it surrounds remains hidden on the horizon. It's the sunlight reflecting off the white sand and coral reefs on the seafloor, hidden mirror signaling the presence of land. Then you see fragments, a twig with a few green leaves, a dry coconut swaying in the waves, a few bright red petals from a tropical plant. Kupona picks up a twig, turns it in his hand. This is a message, he says. It tells us that there is a river flowing into the sea nearby, and that the river comes from an island with trees. You learn that nature is never silent. It is constantly whispering secrets, and you just have to learn to bend down and listen. Consider a popular historical event, Thor Heyerdahl's journey on the Kon-Tiki raft, when he attempted to prove that South Americans could have settled Polynesia by drifting with the ocean currents. But there's a big difference between passive drifting and active navigation. Heyerdahl and his crew were drifting, hoping to land on an island. Polynesian navigators were never drifting, they were navigating, and these bits of drifting were part of a living map, confirming that they were on the right track, that the island they were looking for really existed and was ahead. They weren't relying on luck, they were reading the signs. And here's a strange, little-known fact. Some navigators were said to have such a keen sense of smell that they could smell an island before they saw it. They could smell the sweet scent of jasmine flowers or the damp earth from volcanic cliffs, scents that could be carried by the wind dozens of miles out to sea. They called this island breath. In a world without odor pollution, their sense of smell would have been a sophisticated navigational tool. Historians still debate the veracity of this, but modern experiments have shown that plant and soil scents can indeed be detected at great distances. At sea, under favorable wind conditions, it was an olfactory compass. Your kupuna hands you a shell and asks you to scoop up some seawater. Taste it, he says. You hesitate, but you do. Salty. He scoops water from another area, near where you've seen some floating flower petals. Now taste this. It tastes a little lighter, diluted by the fresh water from the island streams that flows into the ocean. The difference is extremely subtle, almost imperceptible, but it's there. You learn that even the taste of the ocean can be a clue. And then, with a mischievous glint in his eye, Kupona says, "Don't drink too much. Your body isn't a filter for seawater. I'm sure you don't want to be the first person to navigate land using a portable toilet." You laugh, and the serious moment breaks into intimacy. You continue to watch, and now your eyes open. You see the changing colors of the water. You see the tiny debris, and you imagine the scent of the land. All of this combines to form a complete picture of the island ahead. A picture painted in the smallest details. A picture you can feel even while it remains invisible. And in that piece, with the subtle signs of life all around, you feel your mind relax, gently drifting with the current, towards the real dream of a land that awaits. The fragmented lessons begin to crystallize in your mind, no longer as individual skills, but as a single living entity, a mental map. Kupona sits before you, drawing water with his finger on the wooden deck. It's not a map with clear boundaries, it's a web of relationships. Each island is a knot, connected to the others by imaginary lines, star routes, and surrounded by turbulent currents, distinctive wave patterns, and seasonal winds. He doesn't teach you island by island, he teaches you systems. You learn that the Pacific isn't a terrifying void, but a te mona familiar sea, a watery path where everything is connected. This map isn't drawn on parchment. It's woven from memories, stories, songs, and the physical sensations in your body. It's as flexible, adaptable, and alive as the ocean itself. You close your eyes and can picture the entire region, from the Hawaiian Islands to Aotearoa, from Rapa Nui to the Cook Islands, all appearing in your mind as a miniature universe, with every star, every wave, every bird having a specific place and meaning. Now, consider a common historical event, the arrival of European explorers with their meticulous, detailed, and painstakingly printed maps. Those maps were static. They recorded a moment in time. If an island was misplaced, it would remain so for centuries. But the Polynesian mental map was dynamic. It's changed with the seasons, the cycles of the stars, and even the shifting ocean currents over the years. An island was more than a single dot. It was a set of relationships where it lay relative to a star, how the waves bounced off it, and what birds frequented the waters around it. While European sailors suffered from scurvy, from lack of vitamin C, from fresh fruit, Polynesian navigators, armed with this mental map, always knew where to go to replenish their food and water supplies. They don't just cross the ocean, they are part of it. And here's a curious, little-known fact. These mental maps weren't just for navigation, okay? They were the basis for a vast network of trade and cultural exchange that spanned the Pacific, okay? Basalt from Hawaii was found in the Marquesas. Flint tools from New Zealand were found on Rapa Nui, and precious shells from Tahiti were found in Hawaii. All were transported on long-distance ships, guided by mental maps. The navigators carried more than goods. They carried knowledge, genes, and stories. They connected societies scattered across an area larger than Europe, creating a culturally unified world without the need for writing or currency. Historians still debate the extent and frequency of these voyages. Were they regular voyages or seasonal migrations? Archaeological evidence increasingly suggests that this was a vibrant and purposeful trading network. Your kupuna places a small, smooth pebble in your hand. This is from a beach in Aotearoa, he says. Our ancestors brought it here to remind us that no island is truly alone. You hold the stone, feeling its smoothness, and suddenly, the map in your mind becomes more vivid than ever. It is no longer an abstract concept. It is a story of connection, of long journeys, of brave people who crossed oceans to keep their communities together. And then, with a wry smile, Kupuna adds, "Be careful not to drop it into the sea. It has traveled a long way to get here, and I don't think it wants to start a new journey, at least not now." You smile, clasping the stone in your palm. You lie down, close your eyes, and let that mental map unfold in your mind. You see yourself sailing from island to island, effortlessly, as if you were drifting down a familiar river. Each island is a home, each constellation a friend, and each wave a greeting, okay? And in that deep sense of familiarity, you feel your mind drifting away, no longer attached to your body, but spreading out across the ocean, becoming part of that great web of connection, and finally falling into a sleep where you dream of sailing in an invisible boat, guided by the songs of your ancestors to a place where all the islands are one. And then the inevitable test comes. One night, dark clouds roll in, swallowing the sky. Not a star, not a sliver of light, even the moon is gone. You are in a completely black box, where the only sounds are the whisper of the wind and the gurgling of the water. Kupuna is undaunted. This is where you really learn to listen. His voice echoes calmly in the darkness. He instructs you to lie down on the floor of the boat, pressing your entire body against the damp wood. Forget your eyes. Now you must see with your spine, your chest, your skin. You close your eyes and try to concentrate. At first, it's all a jumble of vibrations. But then, gradually, you begin to sense a rhythm. There are long, gentle waves, the breathing of the ocean. There are shorter, more urgent waves, the breathing of the wind. Somewhere, far away, you sense a subtle interference, a slight disturbance in the wave patterns. The echo of an island, Kupuna whispers. It's talking to us through the waves. You learn to trust that vague feeling, your instincts, rather than your reason. You become part of the boat, and the boat becomes part of the sea. In the dense darkness, you are no longer a separate individual. You are a being that feels, that listens, that flows with the flow of the universe. Now, consider a popular historical event. Magellan's journey through the straits that led into the Pacific Ocean. He and his crew were terrified, navigating the dark waters without a map, and they relied heavily on luck. They did not have the ability to read the waves that the Polynesian navigators had. They were like blind men entering a strange room, while the Polynesian navigators were like people who had lived in the room all their lives, able to navigate confidently even with the lights off. The difference was in the accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. Magellan was exploring. They were returning home. Okay, and here's a strange, little-known fact. Some navigators are said to have developed an almost supernatural ability. They could sense the presence of land through changes in air pressure or even the Earth's magnetic field. They described the sensation as a gentle tug, an invisible pull from the horizon. They called it Mori, the life force, the energy of the land, so they could navigate by this vague feeling as if they had a compass implanted in their chests. Historians still debate whether this was a genuine biological ability or just an extreme sensitivity developed over years of practice. Either way, it shows how deeply connected these navigators were to their environment. Your kupuna puts his hand on your shoulder. Do you feel it? He asks. The island is calling us. You try to feel, and then, in a rare moment, you seem to feel a very slight, very distant vibration spreading through the hull and into your body. It's like a tactile whisper. You nod, uncertain. Good, he says. Now, let that feeling guide you. And then, the slight teasing tone, he adds, just don't try to sense it with your nose. The smell of the sea tonight is just the smell of the sea, not some hidden island. I tried, and it just made my nose full of salt. You laugh, and the tension in you melts away. You continue to lie there, letting the ocean's vibrations wash over you. You no longer try to analyze it. You simply exist, part of the darkness, the wind, and the water. Okay. And in that letting go, you feel a deep peace. Okay. You realize that even in the darkest night, there are invisible paths that lead. Okay. And sometimes the best way to find them is to close your eyes and let the world guide you. Kupona's voice speaks one last time. Go to sleep. The island will still be there when the sun rises, and you obey, drifting into a dreamless sleep where you float in a sea of pure sensation, sustained by the endless breath of the ocean. Dawn comes again, and with it, a new lesson, the art of patience and estimation. Kupuna gives you a rope tied with regular knots and a small piece of wood. He cannot rush on the ocean, he says, his voice deep. Okay. And you have no hourglass or complicated device. Okay. You must feel time and distance with your own body. He teaches you to drop the piece of wood into the water and count how many knots the rope pulls through your hands in the time it takes you to feeling. It's a method of estimating the speed of a boat. More importantly, he teaches you to listen to the rhythm of the waves. You learn that by counting the ripples that pass over the side of the boat at regular intervals, you can estimate the approximate speed. Each wave is like the ticking of a giant clock, and you must synchronize your breathing with it. You sit there for hours, eyes closed, counting the waves, feeling the motion of the boat, and trying to calculate how far you've traveled since sunrise. It's a combination of primitive mathematics and meditation, where your mind becomes a living, breathing calculator, constantly updating your position on a mental map without any aid from any other tools. Okay, now consider a common historical fact. The sophisticated marine clocks of the 18th century, like John Harrison's famous chronometer, were built to solve the problem of longitude. They were complex, expensive, and fragile machines. Meanwhile, Polynesian navigators solved the same problem, determining their position at sea using only their senses and a keen understanding of their surroundings. They didn't need complicated machines. They had an internal clock regulated by the rhythms of nature itself. While European sailors had to worry about the accuracy of clocks and tables, Polynesian navigators could simply listen to the waves and feel the movements of the stars. The difference was not just technological, but philosophical. One tried to control nature with machines. The other worked with nature to understand its secrets. And here's a strange, little-known fact. Some navigators are said to have developed the ability to estimate the time of day with astonishing accuracy simply by observing the position of the sun and sensing changes in temperature, wind direction, and even humidity in the air. They had a biological clock, honed over years of practice, allowing them to maintain a sense of time even on cloudy days. They also used their knowledge of constellations to determine the time of night, using the sky as a giant clock. Historians still debate the accuracy of these methods, but it is clear that they were effective enough to allow them to successfully undertake long transoceanic voyages. It is a testament to the extraordinary acuity of humans trained in a natural environment. Your kupuna suddenly giggles. You know, he says, his voice full of humor, sometimes I think our ancestors invented wave counting just to make long voyages less boring. 1, 2, 3. Oh, another wave. How interesting. But then they realized it was actually useful. It was a good way to keep their minds occupied and not think about other things, like their growling stomachs. You smile, imagining ancient navigators first discovering this method. You continue the lesson, and gradually, counting waves and estimating speed becomes second nature. You no longer have to concentrate. It happens unconsciously, like your own breathing. You feel yourself in tune with the boat, with the ocean, and with the flow of time. And in that state of harmony, with the soothing sound of the waves and the warmth of the sun on your skin, you feel your mind become still. You no longer worry about the destination or the time. You simply stay present in this moment, flowing with the flow of the universe. And then, naturally, your eyes close and you drift into a gentle sleep, where the waves become the pulse of time and your subconscious projections continue to map the journey in your dreams. Tonight, Kupuna doesn't teach you about stars or waves. He sits you down in a small hut, the flickering firelight illuminating the river-like wrinkles on his face. Okay, now I will tell you about the invisible teachers. He begins, his deep voice blending with the sound of the waves. They are the dead Kupuna who walked this path hundreds of years ago. He tells you about Laka, the first woman to dare set sail alone in search of new lands, about Moika, the captain who led an entire clan across the ocean, about Hina, who negotiated with the sea god to bring favorable winds. Each story is more than a myth. It is a lesson, a warning, or a coded navigational guide. You learn that the names of stars, ocean currents, even wave patterns are tied to these past figures and events. When you follow the star K, Alayo, Kahiki, you are not just following a light. You are following the footsteps of a great leader. When you feel the waves rolling off Kahola, you are hearing the voices of the warriors who died there. History is not found in books. 'Tis alive in every breath of ocean, in every story told around the fire. Now, consider a common historical fact. European explorers, like Magellan or Cook, often named new lands after their kings, queens, or saints. It was an act of sovereignty, an act of erasing indigenous history. By contrast, Polynesians named lands and natural phenomena based on their own stories and ancestors. Each name was a reminder of the flesh and blood connection between people and land and sea. They did not conquer nature, okay? They were part of it, and their history was woven from the same thread as mythology and geography. While European explorers struggled with isolation and homesickness, Polynesian navigators always felt surrounded by their ancestors and stories, making an unfamiliar sea feel like home. And here's a strange, little-known fact. There's a concept called Wakapapa in Maori culture, Auhau in Hawaiian culture, which is essentially a genealogy. But it's more than just a list of names. It's a thread that connects people to each other, to their ancestors, to the gods, and to the entire natural world. So a good navigator knows more than just navigational skills. He must know his Wakapapa by heart, because it defines his place in the universe and his responsibility to generations past and generations to come. He doesn't sail alone. He sails with the strength and wisdom of all his ancestors behind him. Historians still debate how these stories could have been so accurately remembered over hundreds of years without writing. The answer, perhaps, lies in the power of oral tradition, where each story is embedded in songs, game, dances, and rituals, making them unforgettable. Your Kupuna finishes telling a story about a great storm that sank many ships, and how a navigator saved the entire crew by remembering a similar story his grandfather told him. "They're always here," Kupuna whispers, patting his heart. "If only you would listen." You feel a strange warmth spread in your chest. You are no longer a lonely student. You are a link in a long chain of great explorers. And then, with a wry smile, he adds, "And don't worry if you fall asleep while I tell the story." Even the greatest Kupuna sometimes nod off. But I hope you daren't dream about being chased by a sea monster just because I mentioned it in the story. You laugh, feeling deeply connected to your teacher. You lie down, listening to the voice of Kupuna like a lullaby, and the stories of your ancestors blend into your dreams, turning them into a continuous stream of memories and guidance. In your sleep, you find yourself no longer on a small boat, but standing in a great hall where the faces of the past smile at you, and you know that you are never alone on this journey. Kupuna's voice took on a more solemn tone. "We now head for Raya, he announced, and just hearing the name made the air seem more sacred. "That is the Pico, the naval center of our world." Your boat was no longer wandering aimlessly, it was making a pilgrimage. You sensed a subtle change in the journey. The signs became clearer, more powerful. The waves seemed to be heading toward a common point. The flocks of birds grew larger, and even the stars seemed brighter in the sky ahead. Kupuna explained that Raya, or Hawaii, as it was called in ancient tradition, was more than just an island. It was the birthplace of Polynesian culture, the home of the gods, and the training center for the greatest navigators. Every stroke of your oar is now not just a movement, but a reverence, a step closer to the cradle of your ancestors. You feel a strange connection, as if an invisible string is pulling you forward. It's paging and your heart beats to the rhythm of ancient hymns. Now, consider a popular historical fact. You may have heard of Easter Island Rapa Nui with its mysterious moai statues, often considered one of the most remote and mysterious spots in Polynesia. But few people know that, according to legend, many great navigators set out from Raya to explore and settle far-flung lands such as Rapa Nui, Hawaii, and even Aotearoa, New Zealand. Raya was the center of a vast cultural and spiritual network, an ancient maritime university where knowledge was passed down through the generations. While medieval Europeans were still arguing about whether the earth was flat, navigators from Raya were drawing mental maps of the entire Pacific Ocean. And here's a strange, little-known fact. The Temple of Duputaputia on Raya was one of Polynesia's most sacred sites, and it was also a giant navigational instrument. Structure was arranged to align with important astronomical events, like the rising and setting of specific constellations and the sun during the solstices. Navigators would begin and end their journeys here, perform rituals, and receive blessings. They believed that the spiritual energy from the site as mana would protect and guide them at sea. Historians and archaeologists still debate the exact extent of Raya's influence, but it clearly played a pivotal role in Polynesian expansion across the Pacific. It wasn't just an island, it was a spaceport. Your Kupuna asked you to help prepare a small offering garland woven from leaves and shells. "When we get close, we must ask permission," he says solemnly. You weave the leaves carefully, feeling their texture under your fingers. The work is meditative, and you understand that this is more than just a ritual. It is a way to prepare the mind, to purify yourself before entering a sacred place. And then, with a small smile that softens the solemn atmosphere, the Kupuna says, "Make sure this garland is tied tightly." Idan T wanted to fall into the sea and anger some sea god who thinks this is a poor gift. They can be sensitive. You smile, but still carefully check the knots. When you see a pale green streak appear on the horizon, the reflection of Raya Lagoon in the clouds, your heart beats faster. You don't just see an island, you are witnessing a legend unfold before your eyes. Kupuna places his hand on your shoulder. "Welcome home," he whispers. And in that moment, With the sacred island before you and the offering bracelet in your hand, you feel a deep peace. You close your eyes, letting the breath of the sea and the energy of the land merge and drift off into a peaceful sleep where you dream of entering an ancient temple greeted by the friendly ghosts of history's greatest navigators. A profound silence settles between you and Kapuna, broken only by the rhythmic lap of water against the hull. He looks not at the horizon, but deep into your eyes, as if measuring your understanding. What we have practiced, he begins, his voice low and deliberate. The Europeans, with their clocks and their compasses, called it impossible. They believed our ancestors drifted aimlessly, tossed by waves and wind until they accidentally stumbled upon islands. A faint, knowing smile touches his lips. But you now know the truth. This was no accident. He sweeps his hand across the vast, empty ocean surrounding you. This was a deliberate, systematic settlement of the largest ocean on Earth, accomplished 2,000 years before European ships dared to sail beyond the sight of land. The scale of the achievement that you have been living and breathing suddenly hits you with new, staggering force. You aren't just learning navigation. You are the temporary guardian of a scientific and spiritual tradition that defied the modern world's understanding of history. This knowledge, this kilo, was their technology, more advanced and integrated than any piece of machinery. And it allowed them to master a domain that others feared was the edge of the world. Now, let's address a popular historical event. You've likely heard of the Viking voyages to Iceland and Greenland, celebrated as incredible feats of medieval exploration, and they were. But consider the timeline. While the Vikings were cautiously island hopping across the North Atlantic, staying within relatively familiar climatic zones, the Polynesians had already completed the settlement of the entire Polynesian triangular area, vastly larger than the North Atlantic, spanning tens of millions of square miles of open ocean. They crossed the equator, navigated through the doldrums, and adapted to diverse island environments, from volcanic high islands to low-lying atolls. Their journey wasn't just about bravery. It was a sustained, multi-generational project of discovery and colonization that represents one of humanity's most ambitious undertakings. The Vikings had runes and sagas. The Polynesians had an entire, living, breathing science of the sea, encoded in memory, song, and sensation. And here is a little-known, peculiar fact that historians still debate. There is compelling, albeit controversial, evidence suggesting that Polynesian voyagers may have reached the coast of South America long before any European. Is a sweet potato, a crop native to the Americas, known as kamara and mula in Hawaiian, is being cultivated across Polynesia by the time Europeans arrived. How did it get there? The prevailing theory is that Polynesian seafarers, on their epic eastern voyages, made landfall in South America, acquired the sweet potato, and successfully transported it back across thousands of miles of ocean to their home islands. This wasn't a one-way, desperate drift. It was a round-trip mission, a botanical exchange. The genetic evidence for the sweet potato's journey is strong, but the debate continues. Did they meet the native peoples there? What else might have been exchanged? It's a silent, tantalizing chapter in human history, written not in books, but in the genes of a humble root vegetable. Kupuna watches you process this, the weight of it pressing down. They thought our ancestors were lost children of a greater Asian civilization, he continues, his tone laced with a gentle, historical irony. They could not conceive that a people they considered primitive had achieved what their greatest minds could not. They labeled the Pacific empty, but it was only empty to them. To us, it was full of pathways, stories, and homes. He lets out a soft chuckle. It is almost funny, isn't it? To be so certain of your own superiority that you become blind to the genius sailing right beside you. His words aren't bitter, but carry the quiet resonance of a long-settled truth. You look out at the endless blue, and it is no longer a void. It is a mapped territory, a conquered frontier, a testament to a science that was almost lost, because it was too subtle, too holistic for the outside world to see. The gentle rocking of the canoe becomes a lullaby of resilience. The whisper of the wind carries the voices of all those who came before, assuring you that nothing of true value is ever truly forgotten. As you lean back, this profound realization doesn't agitate you, cradles you. The knowledge that you are part of this secret, this magnificent, hidden truth of human capability, is the most soothing blanket of all, and you drift into a sleep filled with visions of great, purposeful fleets, sailing stars you now know by name. Kupona's gaze grows distant, clouded by a memory of sorrow. Then one day, bigger, noisier ships came. His voice drops, blending with the sound of the waves. They brought compasses, guns, and strange diseases. They called us natives, and our knowledge superstition. You sense a historical sadness in the air. He tells of decline, the last navigators drifting away without successors. The songs being forgotten, the wa, a kalua, rotting on the shore. A mighty knowledge system, once dominant in the Pacific, is on the brink of extinction. It did not die of war, but of indifference, of the pressure to abandon the old ways and accept the civilization of modern tools. You feel an emptiness, as if a guiding star has gone out in the sky. Now, consider a popular historical event. Captain James Cook's planting of the British flag in Hawaii in the late 18th century is often seen as a turning point in the encounter between Polynesia and Europe. But the real, lasting consequences were not the flags, but the cultural erosion. Missionaries banned traditional dances and ceremonies. Traders brought goods that destroyed local crafts, and new diseases wiped out populations, taking with them the ancient knowledge holders. Their arrival marked the beginning of a lost age, when the art of wayfinding all but disappeared within a few generations. And here's a strange, little-known fact. By the mid-20th century, only a handful of old men across Polynesia had any vague memory of wayfinding. In the Caroline Islands, an old navigator named Mo Pialek grew up on Satawal Island, where the tradition still survives in a tenuous way. In Hawaii, a group of enthusiastic young men, led by a man named Ben Finney, were determined to revive it. They believed the only way to prove their ancestors had intentionally explored the Pacific was to build a traditional canoe and retrace the journey without modern tools. They searched far and wide for a true navigator, finally invited Mo Pialek, whose knowledge would be the spark for a grand revival. Historians still debate the exact motives behind this renaissance. Was it cultural nationalism, its academic curiosity, or a deep spiritual yearning to regain a lost identity? Perhaps all of them. Your Kupuna tells of the voyage of Hakale in 1976, the first Polynesian ocean-going canoe built in centuries. Key, they invited a great navigator from the west, he says, referring to Mo Pialek, and he agreed. He saw the fire dying and decided to rekindle it. You picture the scene, a double-hulled canoe plowing through the waves, guided by a man with ancient wisdom, while the modern world watches in disbelief and amazement. And then, Kupona adds a touch of gentle humor. They faced a lot of criticism. Some said they would fail, that they would starve, or be lost forever. But they proved that our ancestors knew what they were doing. In fact, I think our ancestors must be laughing in the afterlife, seeing their descendants having to prove what they knew thousands of years ago. You smile, feeling a warm hope. This story of resurrection is not tragic. It is a testament to perseverance. You lie down, listening to the sound of the sea, which now has a new meaning. It is not just a sound of the past, but also a sound of rebirth. And with that feeling, you fall into a peaceful sleep where the ancient songs are no longer forgotten, but are sung by new voices, taking you into a dream of resurrection and hope. The atmosphere on the boat is unusually quiet. Your Kupona, who was once a pillar of strength, now looks pensive. He no longer teaches you through practical lessons, but through stories of the last navigator of his clan. A man named Kanoa. Kanoa knows he is the last. Kupuna's voice drops, blending with the wind. The knowledge of his clan, the songs, the secrets of the currents, all of it is buried in him, and there is no one to pass it on. You feel the terrible burden, like a great stone pressing down on your chest. Kanoa is old, and his time is running out. Rather than let the knowledge die with him, he has decided to embark on a fateful voyage, not to explore, but to preserve. He set out on the last Wākolua of his clan, alone, with the sole purpose of committing the journey to memory and with, any luck finding a worthy person on some distant island to pass the torch on to. You picture the scene, an old man, skin wrinkled by the wind and sun, facing the vast ocean one last time, not with fear, but with a sacred resolve. Each stroke of his was a prayer, each starry night a page turned, and each wave a whisper from the past. Now, consider a well-known historical event. You may have heard of the burning of the Library of Alexandria, a tragedy of human knowledge. But the disappearance of navigators like Kanoa was like a living library consumed, not by fire, but by forgetting. Every time a navigator died without passing on his knowledge, the treasure trove of oceanic, astronomical, and historical knowledge was lost forever. Unlike the books in the library, this knowledge could not be printed. It existed in breath, in gestures, and in songs sung in tune. The loss was not loud, but as quiet and catastrophic as an island sinking into the sea. And here's a strange little known fact. On his final voyage, Kanoa is said to have carried a living map, a specially woven cloth on which he used nuts and shells to mark star paths, ocean currents, and island locations. But it wasn't a map he looked at. It was a tool to aid his memory, a sacred object to help him focus and pass on knowledge if he could find an heir. Each knot was a story, a lesson, a piece of a vast mental map. Historians still debate the existence of such objects, since they are rarely mentioned in records. Perhaps they were so sacred, so secret, that they were revealed only in the most crucial moments. Your Kapuna tells us that Kanoa found a student on a distant island, not a warrior or a chieftain, but a young weaver with deft hands and a patient heart. Sometimes legacies don't come to heroes, Kapuna whispered. But to those who listen, Kanoa spent the last days of his life teaching everything he knew to that weaver. Not in a grand temple, but on the beach, under the stars, with the sound of waves crashing in the background. And then, with a gentle smile that broke the gloom, Kupona said, "You know, it is said that the first lesson Kanoa taught the weaver was not about the stars, but about how to tie a tight knot in cloth. He said, if you cannot tie a tight knot on earth, how can you trust the knots in your memory in the middle of the sea?" You laughed, sensing the simple wisdom in it. Kanoa's story did not end in tragedy. It ended in hope. A spark had been passed, small but enduring. You lay down, relieved. The burden of history seemed to be shared, and the survival of knowledge no longer depended on a single individual. Kupuna's voice was a lullaby, and you fell asleep with the image of a young weaver diligently weaving a map of the future, guided by the guiding star of the past. And so, our journey comes to an end. Kupuna says nothing more, just sits silently beside you, looking out at the vast ocean under the silver moonlight. All the lessons about the stars, the waves, the birds, and the ancient stories seem to blend together, forming a new and profound awareness within you. You realize that the true legacy of the Polynesian navigators lies not in the islands they discovered or the long, daring voyages. It lies in a philosophy of life. Humans can live in deep harmony with nature, not by conquering it, but by listening to it, respecting it, and becoming a part of it. They did not conquer the ocean, they befriended it. They did not see the stars as cold points of light to be calculated, but as guides, ancestors speaking to them. True greatness lies not in the ability to travel far, but in the ability to feel the invisible connection between all things wherever you are. Now, let's think about one last popular historical event. We often celebrate Western explorers for mapping the world. But the world has always had other maps. Maps of sounds, of feelings, of memories, stored in the minds of people that history has willfully forgotten. When Hakale completed her historic voyage in 1976, it did more than prove an academic hypothesis. It awakened a collective soul, instilled pride, and empowered a people. It told the world that there are many ways to understand the world, and that ancient wisdom still holds true in the age of satellites and GPS. It reminded us that sometimes true progress is not about moving forward, but about going back to pick up the precious pieces we have accidentally dropped. And here is the final truth, whispered softly before sleep. The most enduring legacy of the Navigators is not stone or bone, but a mindset that no place is truly foreign, no distance unbridgeable, if you carry the heart of home within you. They settled the Pacific by carrying their forests, their animals, and their culture on their boats. They made remote islands home by planting gardens and building temples. They taught us that home is not a fixed place. It is a community, a story, a way of life that you can carry with you, even when you are adrift in the vastest ocean. Historians will continue to debate the details, but the core remains immutable. This was a feat of the human spirit. Kupuna places his hand on your shoulder one last time. The journey ends here. His voice is soft as a breeze, but the path does not. You carry it with you now. You feel a deep peace spread through you. You don't have to be a great navigator. Just remember that the world around you whispers that there are other ways to see, and that we are always connected to the past, to nature, and to each other. And then, with a final gentle humor, he whispers, and if tonight you dreamed that you were lost, remember to look up at the stars. Even in your dreams, they always guide you. You smile, eyes closing. Your breathing slows to the sound of the waves lapping against the boat. The image of the ocean, the stars, and Kupuna's gentle face fades, replaced by a feeling of warmth and security. You drift, no longer a student, but part of an endless story, suspended between history and dreams, supported by the eternal whispers of the sea.